terrible has happened.
The Death Star mobile stations are some of the most iconic constructions in Star Wars history. They are heavily featured in the original trilogy, and we even see its conception in the background of the prequel trilogy. Even the sequel trilogy tries to emulate the Empire's Death Star with its own superweapon, Starkiller Base. These are amongst the most powerful weapons ever created in the galaxy, and we've seen what kind of damage they're capable of doing. But what we rarely get to see is the devastation that's left behind. Hello there friends, my name is Alan, and today I want to showcase to you guys what the after effects of this super weapon is on planetary bodies. There's not a lot of information, unfortunately, about this subject matter, but we'll try to find whatever information we can and tell you exactly what happened to each one of the following planets: Jedha, Scarif, Alderaan, and the Hosnian System. When the Sith-led Empire rose from the ashes of the Republic, the timer for Jedha's destruction had already started to count down. Just by its name alone, you can tell that this moon was extremely important to Jedi history. This moon was covered in gigantic ancient ruins and statues dedicated to these guardians of the galaxy. The planet's crust was lined with Force-sensitive kyber crystals, and its main settlement, the holy city of Jedha, is like a mix between Masada and Jerusalem. It's perched on top of a mesa and was home to many different Force sects, many of them which worship the Jedi and light side of the Force. 19 years into Imperial rule, and one can easily see the toll this military occupation has taken on the city and the world. Dusty pilgrims walk alongside heavily armed stormtrooper patrols guarding looted kyber crystals, which ironically will be used on the very weapon that destroys the planet. The Empire had a very strong anti-Jedi sentiment, and this wasn't just limited to, shooting every Jedi that they could find, but also destroying any presence of the Jedi's ancient culture. When the last of the kyber crystals were looted from the Great Temple of Kyber and stored onto shuttles that were headed off-world, the clock had run out for the inhabitants of this world. Now, originally, Orson Krennic wanted to destroy the entire moon. He wanted to show the true power of this very potent weapon he had worked so long and hard to develop. Also, there was this embarrassing issue about an Imperial pilot who defected. He apparently had some very important information on him about the Death Star, and now he was on the moon of Jedha. But Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, who had been eyeing this project for some time, steps in and takes over control of the battle station. He orders a single reactor ignition, which was essentially a lower powered test shot. He would direct it at the holy city of Jedha. Everyone in the city is vaporized instantly. The weapon's blast is so powerful that it penetrates deep into the crust of the moon, displacing massive amounts of earth and rock, lifting the very crust of the moon into the air and finally out past the atmosphere into space. It was as if a comet had struck Jedha. This is what the moon looked like in the days after. The Death Star strike was so powerful that it sent 10 to 20% of the mass of the moon into orbit around it. Fiery pieces of Jedha would occasionally escape the gravity of the moon and land onto Jedha, the planet that the moon orbited. Giant oceans of lava had opened up from the exposed mantle layer, and now molten rivers snaked the surface of Jedha. More than half of the surface of the moon on the side where the laser struck was now covered in black ash. On the planet itself, in the places that weren't suffering from extreme volcanic activity, giant dust storms and ash covered everything like snow. Interestingly enough, the stormtroopers the Empire sent after the incident are dressed very similar to snowtroopers, like the ones we see during the Battle of Hoth. Life was difficult, but one could survive with some decent shelter, and maybe an N95 mask for all the particulates floating in the air, and some goggles to protect your eyes. There were actually still cities left on Jedha. There were still individuals who were perhaps too stubborn to leave, or perhaps unable to leave. On the side where the laser hit, however, the mantle was now exposed and noxious gases and vapors vented into the sky. Which is why the Empire sent for the famous Shutoran miners with their gold-plated exosuits to finish the extraction of kyber crystals, now newly exposed by the Death Star's strike on the moon. Which is kind of ironic because the official story from the Empire about what happened on Jedha was that there was a mining accident. The destruction of Jedha has caused a significant shortage in the kyber crystal supply chain, which is why the lightsabers are becoming harder and harder to lose source from ethical places. Which brings us to today's sponsor, Onosaber.com, the best place for lightsaber aficionados to get lightsabers that aren't covered in the blood of Jedi younglings. Unless, that is what you're into. Today we have the first Dawn. This is inspired by Obi-Wan Kenobi's first and second lightsaber. This was the blade he used before he became a hermit on Tatooine, back when he led the clone troopers on the grand battlefields of the Clone Wars. Now this is one of Onosaber's Xenopixel blades, which means it has an LED strip blade which can be lit separately, creating all sorts of cool effects, including my favorite, blaster mode.
Hold. Steady. Wait till you see their beady aquatic eyes.
Now this is going to be one of your sturdier and heavier hilts, and this is what you want to expect from a Form 3 Guardian Defender type of fighter like Obi-Wan Kenobi. If this sounds like something you guys want to check out, please look at the description down below. We'll link the onosaber.com website down there. They're offering 20% off of all lightsabers, and if you add our promo code, that's MEOW, all caps, they'll get an additional 10% off. Plus, they're going to be throwing in free display stands with each one of your orders. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. Ow, ow, burning. The planet Scarif was very much the opposite of Jedha in almost every way. This world was essentially a tropical paradise. Imagine the Maldives with its shallow seas and tropical archipelagos. The world was chosen as the home of the Imperial Center of Military Research. The entire planet was protected by a giant shield that could only be accessed through a gate. The firepower required to blast your way through this type of defense simply did not exist outside of the Empire's own military force, and so you can excuse the defenders on this planet for being a bit lackadaisical when carrying out their duties. It's for this reason that a deployment on Scarif is quite preferable. It was far enough from the core that you just didn't have any inspection teams from the federal government or the ISB, and at the same time there was no fear of a local rebellion rising up because there were essentially no locals. When Moff Wilhuff Tarkin ordered the Death Star to fire one precise single reactor blast at the Citadel Tower in the center of the Imperial complex, his purpose was twofold. First, he wanted to disrupt the rebels from transmitting those Death Star plans off planet. Unfortunately, his Death Star strike was too late to do any good. And two, his rival and overseer of the Death Star project, Director Orson Krennic, was on top of that building at the time, and with him out of the way, the Death Star would securely be in his possession, which was good because Krennic was getting all uppity about Tarkin stepping in. Now, unlike Jedha, there is very little lore dedicated to the aftermath of the Death Star strike on Scarif. What we do know is that after that laser beam hit the Citadel Tower, it then hit the ocean. And apparently all of the water in all of the oceans evaporated. Part of the surface of the planet was also scorched as a result. Now there are some important things we can discern about the Scarif site just by the angle of attack the weapon takes. One, Wilhuff Tarkin, whether by design or just a lack of time to get the Death Star into position, struck the planet on a very extreme angle. During the Jedha strike, they essentially fired directly down onto the surface, which of course caused much more penetration, which actually allowed the laser strike to breach the crust of the planet and hit the mantle. In this scenario, the laser most likely did not penetrate nearly as deeply and had to travel a lot longer distance through atmosphere and then eventually through water before it hit any crust. It's possible that Tarkin did this on purpose in order to save the Imperial Research Center. Most likely not, though. He didn't really care about people. Although, from what we can tell, rebels like Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso, who were at the Imperial Military Center, most likely died from the shockwave and resulting tidal wave. Maybe we'll uncover some new information about Cassian Andor in his new series, who knows. Now, Scarif was most likely a volcanically active planet. This is usually how archipelagos are formed, so it's possible that the Death Star strike did create some problems, similar to what we saw on Jedha. But I believe far less material was shot up into space because of the angle of attack. It's possible that the crust wasn't even completely penetrated as a result. The destruction of Aldderon would be the last target of the original Death Star. It was shocking to almost everyone because this planet was extremely important to the foundation of civilization in the galaxy. Like I always say on this channel, if Coruscant was the nerve center through which ideas and commerce flowed through the galaxy, then Aldderon was its heart. It's where human culture developed in its finest form, where the arts, poetry, and music were created and flowed from the core of the galaxy to the mid-rim and eventually beyond. In the early days when the Empire first took over, it was unthinkable for Emperor Palpatine to even make a move against Viceroy Bail Organa or Princess Leia because of how important their house and planet was. 19 years later, Tarkin would order the destruction of Alderaan based on some phony terrorism charges. He did it almost as an afterthought, which shows us just how much of the Republic's democratic institutions, which were designed to protect the people, have been eroded by Emperor Palpatine. Although I would argue that the Empire underestimated how much the destruction of Alderaan would galvanize the average citizens in the galaxy to rise up against Palpatine. It was very much a turning point in the galactic civil war for the rebellion, and there was a huge uptick in defection from the Imperial military. Unlike in our previous examples, though, Alderaan was vaporized instantaneously by a full-powered Death Star shot. There was no slowly forming tidal wave of rocks and lava that could be admired from the safety of space.
Oh, it's beautiful.
All that was left of this jewel in the core worlds of the galaxy was an asteroid field known as the Graveyard of Alderaan. The Empire would blockade the system until the Battle of Endor. Following the destruction of Alderaan, the Empire announced that this was no small mining incident. It was a mining disaster because the entire planet was gone. The Empire would start to crack down on its thousands of Alderaanian soldiers, pilots, and crews serving in the Imperial Navy and Army and monitor their loyalty carefully. They would also try to corral and track down all of the remaining Alderaanians in the galaxy because they knew that these individuals would never forgive the Empire. The Alderaanian diaspora would create a flotilla, and they would attempt to search the remains of their planet for signs of their past culture and home. After the Battle of Endor, the flotilla was gifted the remains of the first Death Star for some reason so that they could build a space station in the Hosnian System. It's kind of weird if you think about it. The New Republic was a really short-lived government system, and it really struggled to find itself and also a capital. After the defeat of the Empire, it chose not to station its federal government on Coruscant, the traditional seat of power for both the Empire and Old Republic before it. Instead, they chose Chandrila, a mundane agricultural world home of the New Republic's first Chancellor, Mon Mothma. 2 decades later, the capital was moved to Hosnian Prime, a far more busy and industrial system also located in the core. 6 years after that, the terrifying First Order Starkiller base was revealed. Unlike previous superweapons like the first and second Death Star, Starkiller base was built at a completely different scale. First, it was housed inside of a moon. Second, the new super laser would consume entire stars in order to build up enough energy for its ignition. This meant that the range of this thing was incredible. Starkiller base, for instance, was located in wild space, basically on the other side of the galaxy from where the Hosnian system was located. When Starkiller base fired its massive bolts of energy, this laser traveled faster than the speed of light across the entire galaxy and then destroyed every single planet in the Hosnian system in quick succession. Other than Hosnian Prime, there were 4 other planets: Hosnian, Ratio, Cortilius, and Cardota. Unlike in Alderaan, where the core of the planet just dissipated into space and turned into an asteroid field, the Hosnian system remained active. The explosion from the Hosnian cataclysm created enough energy that a pocket nova sprung up in its place. This happened when the core of the 5 planets were simultaneously ignited by Starkiller's phantom energy blast. And so with all of this death and destruction came a new, hopefully bright solar system. So there you have it, guys. This is the after effect of these devastating weapons. It's kind of strange that Disney hasn't used one of these kind of graveyard planets as a setting for, I don't know, one of the new shows. I feel like it would be very visually dramatic and cool to look at. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, and my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.